The easiest way to get into the meditative state.
This is a March 19th, 2021 Zoom interview and chat with Ms. Beth Upton. For the video version, I imagine some of this could appear awkward, especially for the audience. While I seem to handle awkwardness with indifference, Beth graces with gentle and pleasant speech. Now I'm going to do something unorthodox, even stranger than my various looks of Neanderthal wild man, deer in the headlights, stony, spaced out, blissed out, looking at my watch as to not disrupt the screen recording to see the clock, shifting about on a crackly wicker chair, etc. What I'm going to do now is read verbatim parts of Beth's website bio as it's written in the first person. I've been teaching meditation since 2014, and the more I teach, the more I love it. If there is one thing that I've learned in my years of teaching, it is that we are all different, with our own strengths and weaknesses. In order to teach well, I need to get to know each student individually, guiding each to tap into their own innate wisdom, offering instruction that fits each student's unique circumstances. The 10 years I spent as a Buddhist nun afforded me the great privilege of being able to practice meditation in much depth and detail. I was blessed with masterful teachers and all the support I could have hoped for. I spent 5 years in Myanmar training diligently under the Theravada tradition, under the guidance of Pa Auk Sayadaw. I then spent a further 5 years training in several other methods and spent many months doing long solo retreats in various caves and forests. The opportunity to practice meditation so comprehensively has been the greatest gift of my life. My passion is now to repay that debt of gratitude by providing the same opportunity to others. As well as teaching meditation, I'm also enthusiastic about building community. Over the past years, I've been leading Senditica meditation community in the caves of Almeria, southern Spain. I'm also finding ways that we can support each other wherever we may be in the world. And that's the end of Beth's bio. Amongst Beth's copious wisdom teachings, a big thank you goes for furthering my training in mindfulness of speech and presentation. Be aware that audio challenges may be for me adjusting the Zoom volume without monitoring the audio level for the screen recording. Some of the topics we get into include life as a Theravada Buddhist monastic in Southeast Asia, generosity in a gift economy and giving culture, relationships, community, and lack of community, advice for establishing a daily meditation practice, meditation trends, what Beth's meditation interviews are like, and a mini example interview from my current practice, samatha, vipassana, and super mundane or psychic powers. And without further ado, here's Beth and I. And hi Beth, how are you today?
I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm good.
Right on. Well, I'll just tell people a little bit about how I found Beth before I let her introduce herself. I was reading this book, Practicing the Jhanas, and it's basically Stephen Snyder and Tina Rasmussen's journey through practicing the jhanas with Venerable Pa Auk Sayadaw. So I just thought I would Google to see what Venerable Pa Auk Sayadaw looks like, and one of Beth's videos that she did, she doesn't have too many videos posted online, but she did a small interview type thing with Venerable, and that's how I found Beth. So, Beth, what would you how would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Beth. So I don't know. It depends what you want to know. I mean, when you were speaking about that video, it reminded me of, it was only about a year ago that I made that video. And I was planning to be back in Asia at Pa Auk like now, but I couldn't go because of the lockdown. And I have this feeling of, I hope I get to see him again. Times like that are really precious, where we get to sit and listen to the Dharma from him.
So for anybody that doesn't know, could you explain, maybe talk about him? You know, your bio says that you were a monastic for 10 years, right? And disrobed.
Yeah, that's right. So um, I was interested in my early 20s in meditating more. I had sort of looked at other things to do with my life, but none of them caught my interest. And I wanted to find a place to meditate and was looking here and there. Had tried a few places in Thailand, was looking at a few places in Myanmar. And when I turned up to Pa Auk, actually Pa Auk Sayadaw wasn't there at that time, but something really felt right about the place, that I could ask any question I wanted and usually get a really satisfactory answer. One of Pa Auk Sayadaw's students was teaching, a teacher called Sayadaw Uravata, who's an incredible teacher. I would encourage you all to go and practice with him. So I met him and I was like, he knows. I should stay here and listen to him. And so I did. And in that context, it really made sense to ordain as a nun. And I made this determination to myself, I'll stay until I've learned the essence of what they're teaching here. And I did. And I think so far it's like the best few years of my life. I really adored monastic life. And then after some time, Pa Auk Sayadaw came back, and I also spent time learning from him.
So, you know, not too many people can, in the general population, probably encounter too many experiences like you've had, right? I mean, I'm sure it's not totally uncommon, but perhaps people would like to know, or maybe of interest, if you feel it's of interest, to know kind of like daily life, daily monastic life, and maybe some of the precepts, the excessive, not excessive, the numerous precepts that were required, how those might be relevant, how they might be helpful and challenging at the same time. And then maybe a transition to lay life and how that process went.
That's a lot there, all in one
Yeah.
question. Um, so daily life is like your full-time job is to meditate. So if you stick to this schedule, they have like a schedule, then I think it's 5 or 6 meditations a day, and they're like an hour and a half long each. But me and some others prefer to make our own schedule. But usually when we make our own schedule, it's because we want to do more. And although meditation is a full-time job, probably the biggest complaint amongst the people there is, oh, I don't have enough time for meditation. Oh, I want more time for meditation, because it's also life. The way that Pa Auk Sayadaw teaches is very detailed and very profound. So it's what we can't learn all in 10 days or in 3 months. Most of the people, if they want to learn those teachings comprehensively, they need to stay for years. So life comes in and there's things to do. Friends get sick. Sometimes people come to visit or things happen. And so this was like the main struggle, is to find enough, sounds bizarre now, but to find enough time for meditation, because we become very sensitive to distractions. As for the precepts, so as a nun we had 10 only. The monks have 227, but lots of those 227 in essence are contained within the 10 if we're keeping the 10 very diligently. And so the first 5 are rooted in our wish not to do harm. So not to kill, not to steal, not to do any kind of sexual conduct, and then not to lie and not to take intoxicants. And then the next 5 precepts is more based in restraint. So we keep the precept not to eat in the afternoon, not to watch any kind of entertainments or singing or dancing, not to beautify the body, and then not to use high or luxurious beds. And then the last one is not to use money. And that last precept really revolutionizes the life. After 10 years, we stop to see things in financial terms, and our values come somehow into line with the Dharma. You mentioned about disrobing. So one of the main things I noticed when disrobing was having to re-engage with money and seeing how that interaction with money started to distort my values almost instantly. So, for example, I could eat this or I could eat this. And rather than, as a monastic, I would reflect on gratitude to the donors and humility and gratitude to the body and the importance of the practice. And if I was in a lucky situation as monastic to have a lot of food, then I would tune into what my body needs. But when we're buying our food, we tune into, oh, that one costs £4.50, that one's only £3. It's really messed up. It's just a little example, but so many ways of the influences on how I would use my time, um, yeah, really distorted by finance.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I know I've heard you talk about kind of this vision of generosity too. So and then also you were an econ major, right? In university. So I mean maybe that ties into it somehow. But I also I love this idea of gifting and generosity, and if you want to talk a little bit about why generosity is so important, and then also kind of like your vision for it, and maybe what was inspiring of that vision, and you know, there's interesting too. If anybody's up on culture in the States, there's something called Burning Man. I've never been, but I've heard they have a gift economy there. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts, if you're familiar with that, and you have any thoughts on how something like that might tie in. So it's a lot
Yeah, I've
there,
never
yeah.
been to Burning Man. Yeah, I've never been to Burning Man. I think we see quite a few inspiring examples of gift economy working. And what we notice is that they work when there's a strong sense of community. So, to use a rather ugly economic term, the social capital needs to be quite high in order for gift economy to work. Um, Sometimes I feel of economists, like if they can put a definition on something, they feel like they've trumped it. Like, never mind the whole of human relationships and society and community. We'll call that social capital, and now we know better.
Got it pinned
So,
down, nothing else to figure out. It's all taken care of now, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. Um, anyway, yeah, my degree was in economics and sort of killed my spirit. um, and then I was immersed in this, what we call like a dana economy. Now in the West, I think they're calling it gift economy. And I would also encourage you all, if you're interested in this topic, to look at the work of Charles Eisenstein, who writes about it very brilliantly, very with a lot of clarity. Um, so one of the main things, like if we really get to the root of what money is saying, I've given you something, and you're hereby obliged to give me back something of the equal value in return. That's its whole purpose, right? Like, and it might have to go by the by. So I've given you, I don't know what, 2 cows, and you don't have whatever, but you're going to give it to Joe down the road who's going to give me something. Might go by the by, but the basic premise is one of entitlement. I've given you something, and I want some kind of guarantee I'm getting mine back. And so what Dana economy does is frees us from that obligation, and that allows a purity of intention to grow. So I've given you something because I wanted to give it. And I trust that if we're all in that spirit, then mine's coming to me when I need it. And it's putting the onus on us all to support the things that we value, to support the things where we see need. And on receivers, it's putting the onus on us to be worthy of receiving.
This,
So yeah, that's really like at the heart of gift economy for me. There's much more nuance and much more detail to speak about, but that's really why it's such a foundational piece for Dharma. What I hear in the West is a lot of people thinking that gift economy serves only as a means to access. So if it's by donation, then even poor people can join. But it's really such a small, small piece of the puzzle, the access
yeah.
problem.
Didn't the Buddha say something like, even if you have just give, even if you just have a little? I'm not exactly sure if that's right or not, but yeah, it comes down to the intent, right? And also at the root of it, money is an idea, so it's kind of like rewriting the idea of money in a way. I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other thing with money is, as I was saying before, it's grossly distorting of value. So we have money, or not money, but let's say price. We have price as a function of massively distorted supply and massively distorted demand. And so the number values that we put on things, the prices that we put on things, so grossly, horrifically distort their true value. And when we engage in that system, we legitimize it.
Yeah, it definitely can, right? I mean, I'm sure there's some accurate. I mean, there's just so much to say. Yeah, I'm sure some of it's accurate, some of it's really distorted, and then how all that's gamed. And I mean, it's such a huge topic. Possibly we can explore more some other time. But yeah, that's the spirit of giving, the spirit of generosity, and how where a place that comes from. Like the Buddha said, was a teaching to Rahula, where you notice how you feel before you give, while you're giving, and then after you give. So, okay, so now I guess we can talk a little bit about what you do now, your work with folks and whatnot.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's a strange time to ask me that question because we're just coming out of a pandemic. So it hasn't been the year that I was envisaging. 2021 actually, no, going into 2020, I was complaining to my friends and bracing myself because I had this crazy schedule lined up of changing country maybe like 17, 18 times to go and lead retreats in God knows where. And I'm so done with so much travel that I start to feel kind of physically repulsed by uprooting myself yet again and engaging with a new community, new group of people. So I haven't done that. That's probably on the cards for the coming year. Um, but at least I've had a break, and what I have been doing is teaching mostly my existing student base by Zoom and experimenting with online retreats, which is something I never thought thought I would have done. I would have argued you down if you had told me that I would be spending so much time on my laptop. But although it's not as good as teaching in person, and I very much don't want it to become a new normal, I've had to admit that it is definitely better than nothing. And so that's mostly what I've been doing now. And just as things start to ease, I'm going to move back to teaching in person. So my first in-person retreat for almost a year will be through April in Joshua Tree.
Very cool. That's kind of the nature of, I mean, maybe this is a gross overgeneralization, but it seems like a lot of Brits, they're world travelers, right? Historically too.
Are we?
I don't know. Well, you got the East India Company, right? Was based. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
colonialized stuff. Yeah, we did that. Sorry.
So you also do. You also do. Besides teaching, you also do interviews, right? Well, at least online here too. And by the way, I've attended two full online sits or full day online sits with Beth and various communities she has online, and I've really benefited from those. So thank you again for those. And so, but you also do interviews, right? Meditation interviews online through Zoom, like through maybe an hour to begin with, and then half hour for anybody for meditators. And then also maybe we can you can talk about that, but also talk about what that interview process is like usually, and then what about your interviews with your teachers, and if there's any like similarities or anything worth mentioning there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't really like to teach a group. I don't like to teach sort of a one size fits all, or now we're all going to do this, because everyone's different. Everyone's at a different place in their practice, and also people have different strengths and weaknesses. And so I like to teach people one-on-one. So as you just explained, at the moment I'm doing that by Zoom, and it's probably something I'll continue into the future. So as I lead retreats in different places, sometimes the keener of the students who want to maintain their practice after the retreat, if I just leave, I have nothing to offer, but now I can say, okay, I'll keep teaching you by Zoom. So this is one actual like silver lining of the past year, I think, that I've okayed myself with doing that work. And what was the second part of your question?
Oh, well. I'll just make a comment real quick there too. And I feel
Oh,
pretty
my
much,
teachers.
yeah, I feel pretty much the same way about Zoom. There's opportunities I probably wouldn't have had otherwise, and with people from all around the world. But also, yeah, it does. It's a faint, simulation of real life. It really is. So it's just so much more powerful to be in the presence of another human being, in the flesh, obviously. So, but yeah. How do you remember some of your interview styles of your teachers and whatnot?
Yeah, so they are the same in that they're teaching everybody individually, but they're different in personality and in different ways, the teachers that I've learned from. So Pa Auk Sayadaw is really a master. One of my friends who is also a student described him as being like the wind element, in that he's very pushy but is somehow supportive. And that's quite true. Like, he really pushes hard to get the best out of people, but there's such a strong loving presence there that he can pull it off. Maybe if somebody else tried to be so pushy without that strong metta and that strong spiritual presence, you just feel stressed. But my experience with Pa Auk Sayadaw, that he's also been very supportive. And then among the teachers who teach within the Pa Auk institution, let's say, so Pa Auk Sayadaw's senior teachers under him, they each have their own personality, I think, that they bring to the teaching, so that the content is quite the same. And when I've started teaching in the West, probably I also have my own personality, which is different. I think maybe more, I hope, maybe more relatable to Westerners. Maybe I'm not coming from this very traditional patriarchal culture. I'm using a vocabulary that feels more natural to people. But also in the content, what I've learned is there's need for more support on the basic. So Pa Auk Sayadaw's teachings are really like getting interesting for the students once they already have jhana concentration, and then that's where Pa Auk Sayadaw gets really enthusiastic, and there's loads to say and loads to do. But there's not so much guidance for the students who are not there yet. Mostly just keep on focusing on the breath, be patient, more time on the breath, less distraction. That can be quite a frustrating place for meditators to be. So I've practiced some other methods I've learned from different teachers, and also just through my own practice and things that have worked for me through listening a lot to the students. Find more to give on basic.
So you've got the best of all worlds here. You've got, deep practice in the East with, probably the world's premier meditation master, right? And then you've got, you grew up in the West, so you're familiar with Western culture, and now you're getting more into the basic style too. So I mean, that pretty much covers all the bases, I would think. So that's cool. So maybe we can actually do a little example mini meditation interview, just to kind of give a sample of anybody that's interested in what it might be like. Obviously, it won't be representative of a whole, So, but before we get to that, let's see. What about? So yeah, general advice and encouragement and empowerment for meditation practice. Yeah, since we're on this topic. So, at pretty much different skill levels, if you want to mention anything. I mean, one of the things here, again and again, is trying to establish a daily meditation practice, right, from folks, and how to do that.
Yeah, that's a hard one. So one of the really important points to learn is that the mind is habit forming. And so what we want to do is like put in the effort early on to make it a habit, and then it will become easier in the future. So if we can, usually I say to the students, do the amount that you can realistically do every day. So better, like if you can only do 15 minutes a day, do that, but do it every day, because the mind will get into the habit. Rather than saying, no, I'll do an hour, but then you only end up doing it once a month. So do what you can realistically do every day. And then we need to get really clear about what we're wanting from our meditation practice in daily life. So how are we? Are we stressed and burdened? And we're looking for a practice to give us some calm? Or are we bored and we're looking for a practice that will give us some growth? Or whatever it might be. Are we in stressful relationships and looking for some self-nurture? How really are we wanting our practice to serve us? And then we can look for a practice that will go some way towards meeting those needs. And then we want to use a meditation object that is not too subtle. This is one of the biggest mistakes, I think, of meditators in daily life, is that they go in with a lot of shoulds. I should be able to focus on this for a long time and experience this. And we need to take a look at our mind. And I like this simile of if you're trying to make a Buddha statue from a lump of wood, and you get a chisel and you lob off the corners, you get it vaguely person shaped, and then you take a finer chisel and you put in a few of the details, get the arms and legs going. Then you get an even finer chisel and you start to carve in the details, maybe the fingers and the nose. Then maybe you've got some sandpaper and eventually a polishing cloth. If you want to make a Buddha statue, you've got a big lump of wood and you go in with a polishing cloth, you're going to be there for a really long time. And so oftentimes the best thing that we can do for the depth of our practice is to go in with a really coarse object. Coarse object here could be, if you're practicing with the breath, maybe counting. You might use a mantra. You might do some walking meditation. But if those things are still too subtle for you, if you've got hectic life and hectic mind, then go for something even coarser, which means go for a silent walk in nature. Turn off your phone, put it down, go for a silent walk in nature. For some people, that coarse thing will be taking a nap. Just switch off the noise, take a nap, or lie down in a dark room on your back with no stimulus and don't even try to do anything else. And that might be your really coarse chisel, and then you'll notice some calm come in and you can go to something more subtle. So that's probably the three biggest pieces of advice I have. Do what you can realistically do every day, build a habit, get clear about what you're wanting your meditation to do for you in your daily life, and then don't choose an object that is too subtle.
That's that's so great, because the practical one I haven't heard before about the gross and subtle thing, because yeah, it's just some people just aren't, to go straight into the subtle. That's like certain yeah, that people are
I
dealing
think
with
it's
it.
true, especially for people who have practiced on retreats, and their practice in retreat has been very subtle, and they're wanting to carry that into their daily life, and some stubbornness or maybe pride comes in. They think, no, I don't want to go back to whatever it is, more coarse thing, but they're doing themselves the disservice there. When I'm in London, I practice the counting method a lot.
The other thing is, yeah, once it's a habit, it's no big deal anymore. It's like brushing your teeth. I love that metaphor too. You could skip a day, but you really wouldn't want to, right? It's no big. It's like putting on your shoes or whatever other habits you have, right? So it doesn't even become an issue really
Yeah.
so much anymore.
So now, like, sometimes people ask me about my practice in daily life, and it doesn't feel like practice. It's just what my mind does in gaps is focus on my breath or go to some vipassana object. If I'm sitting on a bus or walking down the street and no one's talking to me, because of force of habit, because of force of training.
So let's talk a little bit about the core practices there, samatha and vipassana, and how they differ in the East and West. And well, and then like what would you give as relevant advice and experience for practicing each of the ones? And then and then maybe what do you think about combining the two? So I think we should first start off with giving your definition of samatha and vipassana, right?
Yeah, so there are two different ways of focusing the attention. Now, when we're practicing samatha, we're focusing the mind on one unchanging concept for a long time. And the purpose of that is really to develop this strength and focus of mind. And along with that comes a lot of bliss, which is sort of the counterintuitive part, that when you sustain your attention on one thing for a long time, you're no longer paying attention to the body, to the sounds, to the time. You're losing all of your diversity of perception, of the past, of the future. It becomes incredibly blissful. But the point there isn't really the bliss. The point is that we can hold this subtle object for a long time. And sometimes I give this simile of, like, if you have a pipe of water with a lot of holes in it, this might be a simile from the Buddha, I'm not sure. If you have a pipe with water and a lot of holes in it, so all of the water is coming out of the holes, so hardly any of the water is coming out the end of the pipe. But if you start to plug up the holes, then you get like a power hose. You get like a laser shoot of water. So in the same way, our mind has all these outlets, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, engaging with the senses, the sounds, what we see, who said what. And when we start to plug up, if you like, those outlets, when we don't allow our mind to flow out in those ways, mind becomes really powerful. So that's samatha practice. We develop samatha practice not for the bliss, but for the tool, to have that very refined, very powerful level of focus and concentration. And with that concentration, we can then practice vipassana. Vipassana is also sustained attention, by a sustained attention on the impermanent, suffering, and non-self nature of all phenomena. So it becomes vipassana meditation when we start to see the momentary arising and perishing of either materiality, physical things, or mentality, the contents of the mind, when we see the momentary arising and perishing. Here, arising and perishing, it doesn't mean changing like a river. It doesn't mean yesterday was Thursday and today is Friday, Thursday's perished and Friday's begun. Or a few minutes ago I was cold and now I'm warm. Oh, it's impermanent. Or the pain was there and now the pain has faded. This is a type of impermanence, but it's not the impermanence that we're speaking of when we speak about vipassana. When we speak about vipassana, we're speaking about things that come into existence and a split second later are no longer existing, coming into and out of existence. So when we can observe things on that level of subtlety, that's where vipassana starts. Some people are able to observe that momentary arising and perishing with what we call access concentration. Access concentration is a level of concentration that's just before the jhana stage. It's also a very deep, sustained attention, but it's not quite yet full absorption. But most of the meditators, in my experience, they find it easier to practice vipassana well if they already practiced deeper samatha practice into the jhanas. The jhanas there just mean that when we're focusing on this one object for a long time, that it's unbroken. That the concentration is unbroken.
And what about the differences? Because it seems like in the West, there's more of a culture among Buddhism and meditation with more on Vipassana. But if I'm getting this right, kind of in the East, that's taught later, right? A lot of teachers teach a full grounding in samatha practice before going into Vipassana.
I think what we see in the West in general is a dumbing down. So,
to say the least, yes.
Yeah, we see a dumbing down, and then, which is, it's not entirely bad. It's like I said, when I started teaching in the West, I also realized I need to teach more on the basic. But what we then have is, rather than them giving a new name to that basic that they're teaching, they call it vipassana or they call it jhana.
Yeah.
It's not jhana, it's just they had some blissful feelings or some light arose in their practice, but they call it jhana. And in the same way, they will focus on the sensations in their body and they call it vipassana. So it's not, but the practice they're teaching is good. There's nothing wrong with the practice they're teaching. What they're teaching is usually basic awareness practice, a basic acceptance practice, a non-judgment, a non-aversion. So all these things may be like foundational skills of the mind, but we can't say yet that we've got into jhana or into the vipassana jhanas yet.
I think that's a good way to put it, Beth. Yes. So, can you endorse any particular methods, meditation methods? I mean, generally speaking, I know we talked about how, individually would probably be better. And then also, what do you see as like trends? Are there any trends you can see kind of in people's practices, either in the teachers that you've studied under or meditators you've worked with, or just in the general culture at large?
So, yeah, I think for endorsing any practice, it really does depend so much on the individual, especially with teachers, because a lot depends on personality. And mostly I feel grateful that we have so much diversity there, because we don't have the Buddha anymore to come along and be the perfect teacher for each person. But where we lack the Buddha, we have diversity. And so maybe amongst all of these teachers, there's enough for everybody to find the part that they need at the right time. And there have been times when I've thought, wow, really, how could anybody find that teaching beneficial? No need to name the teaching, no, but like, really? People are following that? But then maybe some years down the line, I've thought, oh, wow, there's like that little piece that I can take from that. And I'm really grateful that person's teaching. So I think we need to mostly hold the diversity of teachings that we have with gratitude and really with cooperation, because it's very ugly when we see teachers, like in competition with each other. This is not in the spirit of the Dharma at all. At the same time, if there's really wrong things, then we need to call it out. Like if we see teachers abusing their power or engaging in things that obviously cause harm, then we have a responsibility as a community of teachers and students to call this out.
Yes, absolutely. And just on the everyday, day to day, it's kind of like balancing, honesty and self-honesty with how we're actually taking it, but also having gratitude, like you were saying, for the diversity of practice as well. Yeah.
You asked me something else there, and I've forgotten because you keep on asking me like
Oh,
four questions.
I know, right? I was like trying to
Can't
cram
keep up.
everything in as much. I think it was the kind of trends, overall trends. Yeah.
I noticed that dumbing down trend. And I think the teachers don't realize the damage they do with misuse of vocabulary. Because, like I said, the practice isn't what they're teaching is good and helpful, but it's not, let's say, jhana, but they're calling it jhana, or it's not vipassana, but they're calling it vipassana. So the danger is the more people call that basic thing vipassana, the fewer people ever strive to practice actual vipassana. And before you know it, those practices are lost in the world. And it's very difficult to correct people if they think they've done something and you tell them, sorry, no, that's not it. Oh, you thought you were at this stage. No, you're not even at stage one.
Yeah.
That's a really difficult conversation to have with people who have believed what those initial teachers have told them.
It's really tough. It's really challenging, right? Well, a lot of people just aren't even open to feedback. Where actually, I feel that honest feedback from someone you respect is more valuable than a pile of gold, because you can always make more money. You're not always going to get honest feedback from where it can actually help your practice and help other people as well, right? So, yeah, and then language is so important. I mean, that's why I ask at the very beginning your definitions of samatha and vipassana, right? The semantics, and not only do the definitions of words change throughout time as well. It's a very kind of convoluted process sometimes too, and then misunderstandings and clarification. It's just so vast and complex. Can be, but it can also be very simple too.
They've started calling some experiences soft jhanas and other experiences like real jhanas, because nobody had the heart to say to the soft jhana people, that's not jhana. And maybe you had a lovely experience and it's wholesome and it's good, but it's not jhana. But it seems like people are too nice, or I don't know, like on the kindness truth balance, it's too far towards the kindness.
It is. And in the culture, I can see a lot of benefit, or some benefit, and in some of the some of the culture of what is it called? Political correctness. But honestly, for the most part of that, it's self-censorship. People self-censor themselves a lot because they don't want to be perceived as being, unkind or some kind of offensive. But I would say that anybody that's even remotely concerned with other people and coming off with that impression, and they're not getting satisfaction from offending people, then they're not being offensive or insensitive, So if that concern or that even that intention or thought comes in, it's not. A lot of people hold back what they would actually say that could benefit because of this culture of political correctness. Well, that's kind of the con of it, right? I mean, we're already so familiar with a lot of the so-called benefits of it, and I guess there are, but. I don't want to get too political here, but that would be one criticism I have of it as well, of that. So
another big trend I see, or I have some bias here because people tell me things that maybe like they know I have this interest already, but I hear a lot from my existing students about how they feel a lack of community. This I hear really often, like, what does Sangha mean to us here in the West? It might not look like this monastic lay division, but there seems to be a real lack of working together, a lack of communal space. And then I run this little community down in Spain. I say I run it. my very good friend Daya is running it in my absence because I've barely been there over the past year. But anyway, I founded this little community in some caves in Spain. And what I noticed there is that a lot of people, or let me rephrase that actually, there's few people who they have some like nice idea of what community is like, but the work of co-living and of doing the relational stuff, those skills have really atrophied in us because of our very individualistic lifestyle. And there's work to be done there. And if we really want strong Sangha to thrive, then we need people who are up for that work. And so that's why my enthusiasm has shifted a lot towards relational work. So that's really what I'm putting my heart into this year, is looking at ways of bringing the same refined attention of meditation into the way that we relate, sort of with the long-term aim that will help to foster more meaningful community.
Beautiful. And, you know, that's the thing with, and it's even further complex, added complexity with this whole pandemic thing going on, right? With community, it's a whole different ballgame, even more, right? And one thing I learned about visiting Maba, it's a monastery about an hour from here, is you get the best of both worlds, right? I mean, like you're saying, in the West, we're so individualistic, right? For good and ill, and otherwise. But there, it seems like there's plenty of time for community, but everybody's individual life is also respected. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. It's just kind of like this melding or merging. At least that was my experience. Maybe I can't speak for anybody else, but you know, I've got the best of both worlds there.
It can be like that. I haven't been to that community, but another perspective on that is that people like communities that they can dip into.
Yeah.
Contribute little, experience the benefits, and then leave. And usually the only way that's possible is if there's a few people with massive sacrifice to keep the whole thing together. And I'm not sure if that's what's happening there, but that's what happens often.
That very well could be.
Dedicated people, like, you know, like giving their blood and sweat and souls to keeping the thing going, and other people come along and say, oh, this place is lovely, it's nice for a day trip, thanks, beautiful place, and then they're off.
That's a great point, Beth. And you know, and I would say I would give thanks out there too, because of all the venerables and community there as well. That said, you know, about people dipping in and out, that's true, but you got to start somewhere too, right? Because if people don't even have that, sometimes in the West, it's just, there's like really no sense of any kind of authentic community. I mean, well, some maybe, but if you get to experience it just for a little bit, maybe they might be more likely to actually be more immersed in something like that. You know what I mean? Get a taste and then really get more serious about it as well, instead of not even having that experience to begin with. But yeah, no, I totally get you. That's it, yeah. And then living on the surface and, you know, pretending that, yeah, it's something it's not. That's another thing too, right? So.
Yeah, I think if we really want to build community, then we need to start from a place of acknowledging there's nothing there. For the moment, there's nothing there.
Honesty.
And so we need to approach it all with the attitude of, okay, what can I give to build this thing that currently isn't there? What can I bring? And it's a space into which we mostly give, and then we might be surprised at what we get back in return. But to really approach with this giving and not look for where can I go to take and be heal and get what I need, because those places frankly don't really exist at the moment for us in the West.
And that's a great point too. I was thinking it ties into generosity, right? I mean, we don't have to be just generous with our money, right? We can also be our time, our skills, our expertise, our presence, you know, our care, our kindness.
Yeah, all of those things.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So if you want to do just like a mini meditation interview here, and then maybe a couple other things, but yeah, we're getting close towards the end here. So what I would say is, in my practice right now,
So I'm interviewing you.
yeah, yeah, right. So yeah, go ahead.
That's
So
not weird for you. That's not weird for you, no?
what's not weird for me, or what's weird for me?
To like have your
Oh yeah,
meditation interview recorded. You're cool with that?
yeah. Why not? I mean, I'm recording.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but we'll just, we'll keep it. We'll keep it just maybe a topic or two. So it is weird, but hey, you're weird. We're all weird, right? So.
Okay.
Like maybe in 2012 when I first started, I was experienced tinnitus, like ringing in the ears, and that kind of went away for several years. But I've noticed it a little bit coming back here recently. Do you have any like thoughts on that advice?
Is it, we pronounce it tinnitus here.
Ah, okay.
So is it tinnitus that you experience or when you're meditating, or is it that you experience all of the time and is disturbing you in your everyday life?
Here recently, no, not. It's usually right around meditation time, and then I think maybe in 2012 it was a little more persistent for a while, but now it just seems, or maybe I'm just not noticing it. It just everything becomes more amplified when meditation. But I would say definitely it was way more noticeable throughout daily life. 2012, not so much now.
Yeah, so if it's noticeable also in your daily life, like you're walking down a busy street and you can still hear this ringing, then that's maybe what needs some attention from somebody who knows about that condition. But what we hear a lot from meditators is that when their concentration starts to deepen, then their ears start to ring. And this is very many meditators. I don't want to say all, but it's a lot, maybe the majority. And so my little non-medical conclusion is we all have ringy ears. I know I do, but usually we've just got too much distraction to notice it. And as our mind becomes quiet, we start to notice that ring. So it's just another thing to accept and ignore.
Okay. And I guess maybe just one other topic here. I have several of them, but let's go into this. What about blockages? So I would say maybe energetic blockages. I don't know if you know kind of what I talk about, but or what I'm mentioning. But for me, it's actually starting to clear up a little bit. But for a while, it would just be like my right nostril would be blocked up. It would come and go. It would unblock. Usually they say a lot of times air will go in for a certain amount of time on one nostril, switch to the other nostril, and back and forth like that. But for me, it was just persistent blockage on the right side. I don't know.
Always one nostril. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter. Like, so I assume you're not speaking about like a medical condition like
I wouldn't think so. I did have my nose broke a couple times in
marble up your
childhood.
nose or something.
What up my nose?
Marble.
Oh, I should check for that, I guess. But I hope, yeah, I don't anticipate any marbles, but you never know.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, there seems to be like two different approaches to samadhi that sort of run alongside each other, and they're different, but they're sort of working together. So one is this Theravada way of focusing on a single object, basically ignoring everything else, including the energy in your body or any blockages. Just continue to focus. And what we find is that when we do that, when we do it skillfully, then automatically blockages in the body start to release. And we can notice if we're sitting slumped, well, immediately our body will, without effort, it will become erect. We might have like electric shock of where energy gets released. All types of things can happen in the body where basically we're coming into balance. And that's the way that I trained. So to ignore basically blockages in the body, focus on your meditation object and allow these things to unravel by themselves. Alongside that, there's a different tradition, which is to do with the chakras, Kundalini, for example. Some yoga practices go into this where you practice specifically on the body to find the blockages, do practices to unblock them. And according to those traditions, the result is the mind will concentrate. So sort of similar, but in one way, like we're switching what is the practice and what is the result. And so this way of working with the energies in the body is not the way that I trained in. I know a couple of my friends come to mind who are very good at those practices, but it's not what I would instruct. And I've got far more experience in teaching the Theravada way, which is just ignore those blocks. It really doesn't matter which nostril the air's going in and out of. As long as you have wise attention on your breath, eventually it will sort itself out.
It's kind of like
Everybody's body's perfect. If we wait until we have a perfectly balanced body, then we'll be here forever.
it's kind of like a top-down or bottom-up approach, right? Maybe, you're approaching it different ways. So, so I guess we can go into a couple quick Dharma questions here, right? I know sometimes the samatha stuff is associated with, so-called psychic powers or supranormal abilities. Oh, right, yeah, and you being in England, right? All the, the hinges and yeah, all the so anyway. So what is like the prevailing? Well, like Stonehenge and Avery Hill and
right.
all the
Yeah.
all those different megalithic monuments or whatever you call them. So it's supposed to be a hot spot for that, I hear. But
Therefore, I must be
therefore,
a witch.
huh? Well, of course, right, Beth? No. So the prevailing gold standard right now about psychic, about those kind of things. So, like, what is the kind of Theravada approach? I know, you have some academics who completely kind of just discard all that and say it's just aspect of consciousness, and then you have people with all these detailed encounters and things like that. And then, but one thing I hear is that they can be a distraction from the end goal as well. So, yeah, I guess in a nutshell here, what would you say about that?
So those practices are definitely possible. My teacher, Pa Auk Sayadaw, teaches them. But he didn't teach them, or only recently when he was like old, he started teaching them, I think because he didn't want this controversy of like, oh, why is he teaching this? And it's a distraction. But actually, for the meditators who do, they experience as being really beneficial because, first of all, the concentration that you need, the depth of samadhi that you need to be able to do those practices is so deep. And then also, those psychic powers can really add some wisdom to the practice. So one of the practices that Pa Auk Sayadaw teaches, for example, is to see back many, many hundreds of thousands of lives or many, many world cycles. And there's something that happens to the urgency, spiritual urgency, when you've seen the world destroyed by fire and then a new eon is born and there was another big bang and there was another one and destroyed again and all the humans have been wiped out and here they are back again, round and round and round. And think, how many more times do I want to go around this? And we stop sweating the small stuff and not wanting to get political or imply that like our environmental crisis is the small stuff. On a multiple eon scale, it is. And the big question is, like, how do we get out of samsara? And that's a possible thing to do. And so anyway, I went a bit off track, but each of the psychic powers are giving their new flavor of wisdom. They're rooted in the Dharma also. They're not necessary for liberation, but we can say like they are helpful accessories.
Samvega, right? That's the Pali word for spiritual urgency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. So we're probably just not going to have time to go into, I was going to ask about kind of the arhatship, the kind of the restrictions on that in monastic life, and then how some lay people have come out and claimed arhatship, and what would be the pros and cons to that. I don't think we're going to have time now, are we? So leave that as a juicy cliffhanger, maybe for a possible part two. So Beth, thanks for joining today and doing this. You would like to leave with any kind of information, how people can contact you again, and kind of what you're up to, what you'd like people to know, anything else?
I think most things is on my website, which is another thing like I did in a year of pandemic. So yeah, thank you to everybody who helped me get that website done. So that's where you can find information about whatever events I have going on, whatever retreats. And also, if you want personal instruction, then you can also book an appointment with me there.
And that's BethUpton.com. And also sign up for her mailing list too, because there's some stuff that's not public on there that you will have access to, right? When you sign up. So.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Beth. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah. Lovely conversation.